Hello and welcome to this episode. Do you have a fascination with consulting oracles and learning what the future holds? You know, maybe you even consulted a psychic or two or dabbled in divination tools. You know, quite often, many of us have abilities to get prophetic glimpses into the future and what it holds. This is actually tapping into extrasensory perceptions, also known as your sixth sense. So welcome to Creative Visions TV. I'm your host, Karen Dahlman, and today our topic is just that, developing your sixth sense. Now, we have two guests with us today. Super excited to bring them on, but first let me tell you a little bit about them. They are both authors and researchers in their own right. They've dedicated many hours and time and effort and energy into the study of consciousness, awareness, and parapsychology. Also the supernatural, which we could really probably call super normal potentials within the individuals, within ourselves and within the world at large. So our first guest that'll be joining us, her name is Theresa. And yes, she's been on this show before, and the link will be below to the first time she made an appearance on this channel. She's a best-selling author from the UK, and she's written numerous books and encyclopedias about many topics that have to do with the unexplained and the supernatural and paranormal. Now, she writes, or has written, I should say, for 2 decades, and writes about topics such as psychic abilities, intuition, heaven, dreams, anything that has to do with supernatural abilities and what goes on in the bumps of the night. She also holds a master's degree in theology and English from the King's College, Cambridge. And she considers herself an ordinary person with extraordinary experiences. Now, our other guest, her name is Julia, and she holds a master's degree in neuroscience and a PhD in communication science and disorders. Now, she's very well educated and teaches and speaks and lectures all over the place. Let me give you an example. She's a fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. She's a founder and research director at the Mossbridge Institute. She's a visiting scholar in psychology department at Northwestern University. And one of my favorite colleges, she's an associated professor in integral and transpersonal psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies. Listen, she does a lot, as I mentioned, but her focus is on teaching and learning about love and time and parapsychology. Now, together they teamed up and wrote a book about the spirituality and science of precognition. Now, this is a book that's soon to be released. It'll be hitting the stands mid-October, about October 15th, 2018. However, there are pre-sales now going on around mid-September. You can find their books at many bookstores all over the place, as well as on Amazon. Now, the title of their new book that they wrote together is called The Premonition Code, The Science of Precognition, How Sensing the Future Can Change Your Life. Now listen, I'm so excited today about this show. I'm excited about our guests, as you can probably tell, and we're going to jump right into premonitions, precognitions, and ESP. So, without further ado, I'd love to welcome Theresa Cheung and Dr. Julia Mossbridge to the show. Welcome, you guys. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you for joining me, Theresa and Julia. So, Theresa is, raise your hand, Theresa, so they know who you are. And Julia is the other person. Yay! Okay, we're going to jump right in, and you guys, just so you know, Julia's really the science behind this, and Theresa's the spirituality behind this, and they came together to create this wonderful book and give you some more science about why premonition precognition works. Now, was it a premonition that brought you two together? I've got to ask that question.
Maybe so. It's so hard to trace, right, Theresa?
Yeah, exactly. It's a combination of factors, as so often in life, all these complex threads, but it did feel very much like a calling, and we write that in the book, that it seemed like we're both kind of heading in this direction as a kind of a catalyst for what we want to do now for the rest of our careers. And for me, certainly, as you say, I've been writing best-selling books about the paranormal, about the psychic world, about psychic abilities for many, many years, but I've always done it from an anecdotal belief basis. And whenever I've been asked about the science, I didn't know what to say. And then when I decided to dip my toe into social media a couple of years ago, because I'd never been online since, suddenly I got this barrage of criticism from people. Of course, a lot of support, you know, the converted were there with me, but the barrage of criticism. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to answer people who said, where is the science? This is all in your head. You're going insane. So I went on a search, and one of the first in organizations I came across was IONS, the Institute of Noetic Science, where Julia was. And I found Julia absolutely fascinating. I researched her, looked at her videos, and I urge anyone to go and have a look at her YouTube videos. She's so interesting, but this science isn't out there, and I did not understand why. When I got in touch with the IONS team, I kind of understood why, because they're academics and they're scientists. So this is, and they don't speak in that language. Like with Julia, it was very funny in the book. You know, the title of the book, for example, the title of the chapters, she was doing these very worthy, you know, earnest titles, and I was thinking, no, let's go in the movies and do Time After Time, you know, Back to the Future,
right.
Because I wanted to try and speak to people, and it has been a bit of a struggle because of the different ways we're working together. But that was my role. Anyway, I'll hand over to Julia now. As I said, she's the science in the book, to present the science of precognition in a way that hopefully the layperson can understand.
Yeah, so my experience was, I mean, sort of my story is similar to Theresa's, except from the other side. So my story was, you know, I would speak at these conferences, and I would go to Google, and I would go to different universities and around the world, and I would give my talks, and I would say, why aren't people up in arms with the potential of, you know, what we're talking about here? Precognition can change the world. We could create groups of people who are precognitively detecting terrorist events, and why aren't we doing that? And then when I met Theresa and I saw her style of really reaching out to where people are and bringing them in rather than trying to ask them to master, you know, 10 years of this training, I was like, oh yeah, that's why, because they don't know what I'm talking about. So Theresa surprised me one day when I was just sort of frustrated and writing a note to the universe saying, well, you know, what do I do next? Like, I don't really know. And I was so used to doing things to try to get this message out into the world. And I had this phrase appear in my head, which was reverse the polarity. So like, if you think of a magnet having two poles, you know, positive and negative, reversing the polarity would just be switching them. And I thought, well, what's the polarity I've been using? What have I been doing? I've been doing. So I'm going to reverse the polarity, and I'm just going to receive and see what happens. And within a very short period of time, maybe 5 minutes, I got this note from Theresa, with whom I had already been friends and colleagues, and we worked on a project before. She said, so I submitted a book proposal with your name on it.
Wow.
to Watkins Media in the UK, and it's all about precognition, and are you up for it? And I was like, okay. So it felt like I was receiving that, and it felt really good because I knew from her writing that she would reach a lot of people that I couldn't. And
it kind of just felt so unjust because, as I said, I researched Julia, and there she is on the stage with Deepak Chopra, Rupert Sheldrake, all these top scientists, and yet no bigger message. And then the people I mix with, the authors I mix with, who couldn't dream of doing that, getting all these books, you know, and talking about precognition and talking about sixth sense. And then I thought there's this whole lot of scientists who are actually researching this properly rather than just collecting stories. And it just felt unjust. And I hope that this book, I hope this book does something to correct that, what I feel is a bit of an injustice, that there is so much fascinating. I had my mind blown away by the science that's out there. People don't realize the science. And I know that because on my page, I decided to do a week of introducing scientists from IONS on my page. I called it, Do You Want to Know the Truth? And I did the iconic scene from the Matrix movie, red pill, blue pill. Do you want to take
so
red
cool.
pill?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you know, I get 12 likes, you know, I went to sleep and I woke up the next morning, there were 17,000 likes. I don't know what happened. It was absolutely bonkers. And for that whole week, there was so much fascinating because I gave them 2 minutes each to talk about their research. And we had Julia on there talking about her research into time and precognition. And people just weren't aware of it. My readers certainly weren't, because they've got so used to thinking there's no science. If you're spiritual science, there's no science. The two can't meet. And what we're happening now, and I found that science and spirit the gap is closing.
Oh, wonderful.
There's a lot of science now which is showing that a lot of these experiences we can't understand them. There is research showing that there's something there. We don't know what, but definitely something there.
And from the science side, there's more and more scientists who are starting to say, now wait a minute, we haven't been behaving as if we totally understand time, and we totally understand space, and we totally understand human consciousness and unconsciousness. And in the last decade, it's been, what are these things again? How do they work? And so there's an opening for taking into account some of the, tens of thousands-year-old stories and thousand-year-old stories, 100-year-old stories, and present-day stories of things like precognition and prophecy, precognitive dreams. And these are consistent throughout history, so they must mean something. And then the question is, what do they mean?
Well, you guys, I got to tell the audience here, I read their book and I was super fascinated with it because they do get into ways to develop your sixth sense. And I like what you guys talked about with the time. To me, it's like a time loop. And you want to talk about that time-space continuum a little bit and how that factors into this, precognitive abilities?
Sure. Okay. So first of all, just to be straight, to be super clear, so let's define precognition as getting information from what we call the future, so something that hasn't happened yet to us in our experience. And that information can be conscious, so I could actually have this thought, oh, it feels like in a few minutes there's going to be an accident or something, or I'm going to win the lottery or whatever it is. And it could be unconscious, so I might not know I'm having it, but I'm changing my behavior sort of unconsciously to as a result of getting the information from the future. And those things can seem to happen in our daily lives. So is it okay if I give an example?
Oh, please do.
Okay, so here's an example of an unconscious one, because that's a little harder to understand. The one I give in the book actually is I was arguing with my son because he came home from school. He was about 12 or 13, and he rode his bike home from school, which he did every day. And we had a garage, and what he needed to do was take his bike after school and lock it up in the garage and then lock the door of the garage. We didn't live in a horrible neighborhood, but people would steal things out of garages, so we needed to lock the garage. It wasn't that big a deal, but on this day, it felt like a really big deal that when I asked him, did you lock the garage? He said, I don't know. I think so. And I started yelling at him saying, are you sure? You have to be sure. And he looked at me like, are you crazy? This is not a big deal. And I just didn't know why I was yelling at him, but I stomped out of the house, marched to the garage and checked the door. And in fact, he had locked it. I was like, God, what's my problem? And I marched back to the house. And as I went back to the house, I saw there was an electrical fire on the outside of the house, and it was right on the opposite side of my husband's oxygen tank, or actually he was my boyfriend at the time. He was going through an illness, needed an oxygen tank, which was on the other side of the fire, so it was like directly like that. So it would have been a huge problem. And so then I thought, okay, well, so maybe that's why I got so angry and felt like I had to go check myself, sort of the future calling me forward to help prevent this accident. I wasn't conscious of it. I didn't understand the motivations for my behavior. But that's what's going on. Example. What we do, what we can say is that when you take that kind of thing into the lab, so you can test both conscious and unconscious precognition in the lab, and I won't get into that until later if you want. But basically, there's ways to do it. There's statistically reliable evidence that it can be done. Some people are better than others, but on average, most people have some ability in this area. It's not a huge it's not the same kind of sort of signal as a memory of what happened in the last 2 minutes. If you had to summarize what happened in the last 2 minutes, you would have a better memory. Most people would have a better memory than what's going to happen in the next 2 minutes. So our memory of the past is a little bit better than our memory of the future. But there's some kind of indication that from physics and from physiology, so how our body's working in relationship to time, that the changes that occur in bodies and in particles can be influenced by future events, and that might be the mechanism for precognition. Although the truth is we don't know the mechanism for precognition. So here we're speculating, right? So in physics, you can set up an experiment where you make a decision in the future after a particle should have already gone through a particular area of some kind of setup. And that decision that you make in what we're calling, I'm doing this because the future gets really ill-defined when it can make effects on the past. But anyway, when you make a decision in the future, the path of the particle in the past seems to be different depending on your decision that you're making in the future. And similarly, certainly in humans, but even in animals. So for instance, there was a study recently with planaria, those little worms that have the heads that you might have worked with in biology class. Yeah. Anyway, in planaria, for instance, you can have a random number generator hooked up to a plate that has a planarium on it, and you can shake the plate, which usually makes them scrunch up. But you can also look at how they're behaving before the random number generator chooses whether it's going to shake the plate or not. And you could show that statistically reliably that they're scrunching up more times before the plate is shaken than not. And the reason I'm telling you this is because it's showing that the body itself, even in these simple animals compared to us, and certainly in humans, is getting information from what's about to happen in the future when it's something important to the organism. Theresa, you want to translate?
No, you see, it's that. I could just sit and listen for ages. It's like school again. And for people who sort of hazed over with science, it's just been fascinating for me to see that what I've written about all this time, that is scientific research, almost kind of backing it up. That's what I find so fascinating, because I get so many people writing to me that they've had glimpses of the future, they've sensed something or dreamt of something, and then it plays out.
Yeah.
And they often write to me saying, how can this happen? And I just think, oh, it's just wonderful. It shows that there's more to this life than meets the eye. But here we have scientists actually studying this. I can't believe it, actually, there are teams of scientists studying this, that people who are able to sense the future, looking at, how animals or whatever do it. And I could just sit and listen to it for ages, because for me, it's kind of validation for what I've done all my life. It's super sense. And the US military, I found out as well, is investing millions of dollars in this spidey sense they call sensing the future, because it can save lives. Because obviously, it's the super soldiers who can go into an environment and sense what's going to happen. Yeah. And in 2014, I believe, about 4 million was spent on spidey sense, they call it.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that the US military scientists are studying this says there's something there.
Well, we've always had remote viewing in the military as an aspect, which you're talking
Julia
about.
Julia knows all about that, because she's friends with, with people who work in that field, aren't you, Julia? You know all these people who have been legends for me as I'm growing up, who've written about these things, and Julia knows them, and she just trips off her tongue. I know this person. And I'm what? It's fascinating.
Well, I had to train myself to understand this field. I wanted to train myself in both unconscious, and most of my precognition is unconscious, but I wanted to train myself to get better at that, but also to get better at conscious precognition, where you're actually sitting down and saying, and intentional, or what I call controlled precognition, which is related to remote viewing. And so it's when I sit down and say, now I want to draw a picture of what I'm about to see or what's about to happen. So you're really trying to harness it. Uh-huh. Yeah, so some people will email Theresa or me or our colleagues about being disturbed by their precognitive abilities. And some of them have traumatic brain injury, some of them have traumatic life experience. It's often related to that, or they seem to have that in common, I guess I should say. So for instance, imagine knowing when anyone around you is going to die. That would be very disturbing. And so the other side of, we talk sort of blithely about developing your precognition and stuff, but if you're a person for whom it comes too easily and it bothers you, it's also important to develop your controlled precognition. So in other words, to take your precognitive abilities and actually harness it so it's not coming up all the time for you. Mm-hmm. This happens to more people than you would think. I was at a conference of a bunch of academics, and I was talking about this problem, and I was on a table with 8 people, and 2 of them said quietly to me afterwards, as usually is the case when academics tell me about their secret things. I guess there's a taboo around this. They said, 2 of them came up to me and said, so I dream about when people are going to die, and I'm right 90% of the time, and I don't know what to do. And so I'm taking them through a course of sitting down every day and trying to be precognitive, just so it's isolated to that time and you have more control over it, and it doesn't dominate sort of your whole life willy-nilly. So that's an important aspect that a lot of people don't talk about.
That's
Yeah, I get
very
stories about
interesting.
people who-
I find for myself, I have this ability, which is talking about premonitions. When somebody's pregnant that's close to me, I always know the sex of the baby. It's like it comes to me. It's not like I sit and think about it. It may come to me in dreams. We'll talk about dreams here too. That's one way to tap into these abilities. But it will come as a dream, or all of a sudden I'll get a, "Hi, this is who I'm going to be." It's just bizarre. How, like you said about people knowing death, I know the birth or the sex of babies.
That's much
Wow.
nicer.
Yeah, that's a lot easier to swallow, I think, to deal with than, death. Mine's about birth. Mine's about coming into life and not ending your life.
Wow, that's beautiful ability. But I do get stories, as Julia was saying, people who say that they've had a dream and somebody is going to die, and then they do typically 1 or 2 days later. And
Wow.
what's going on there? And often they have no idea of knowing it could be a car accident or a random. It's not like these people are ill and you're expecting it. Those stories are what really stand out, and I think this needs to be researched, and it is being researched. And as I say, the results are mind blowing. But that's also the whole purpose of this book. With what Julia is setting up, is very ambitious. This is her field, in that we are encouraging people to take part in a scientific experiment as they work through the book.
That's right.
So that their precognitive ability can be recorded, and there's some people, of course, will do better than others, and that doesn't matter, because we can all start training it. And that's what we're saying. It's not like we don't want people to get competitive about this. We are only expecting a handful of people to make it to the Hall of Fame. But this is all to be worth studying. And also, for me personally, it was, as an answer to the Randi challenge, the James Randi famous $1 million. If psychic powers are real, prove it. And we're hoping in some way that in time, that this will gather momentum and we can point to this, because the experiment that Julia is setting up, it is impossible to use cold reading or any form. It's purely scientific. And that was the problem with James Randi. He was not a scientist. So I'm sure his test was fine, but he's not a scientist. And scientists who are objective need to be studying this, not people who have a bias one way or the other. And Julia's like that. When I first encountered her, I said, aren't you biased when you're doing this? Because I kind of got the sense that this is where her fascination is, that she wants to prove it's real. And she said, no, I'm a scientist. It's data. I'm not going, proving it wrong is just as interesting to me as proving it right. And that's what a scientist is, and they're the people who should be studying psychic ability, not magicians or believers, scientists.
Well, Theresa, it's funny because I realized when you say that, I do get in trouble on both sides of the aisle here, because from people who are true believers, so they get mad at me because they say, well, that experiment, didn't validate the hypothesis, and you didn't show precognition with that experiment. Why did you publish it? And I'm like, because you have to publish everything. You have to, everything that's suitable for publication. I have a ton of experiments that are like, I realized I made a mistake or whatever. I'm not going to publish those, but ones that are suitable for publication and ready to go, you publish. And you say this didn't replicate or this did replicate, and then I get.
She's a scientist first and foremost, and that's what I love, is the authenticity of that. And they're the people I think should be testing afterlife communication or precognition or any of these abilities.
And there are scientists testing.
Randy wanted to prove one thing. He set up the test. He's not a scientist. It needs to be done scientifically.
All right.
So I'm hoping that the girlies. No, Julia hates it when I talk like that. I'm hoping a bit of girl power that we can actually have an answer to the Randy. And that's another thing that's so wonderful about Julia. She's the only woman out there.
That's right.
You've got these scientists and they're great guys, the Sheldrakes and all that, but where are the women?
Yeah.
Right here.
We have Dr. Julia Mossbridge.
So I have an idea about how to explain the time loop thing.
Please.
I'm sitting next to my bed and I realized I need fabric. Okay, so here's my comforter. It's this blue thing. You see my hand in the middle? This here? That's the present moment. Okay? And is this to your left or to your right?
My right.
Tell. It's your right? Okay. This is the past. Most people put the past on the left.
That's right.
This is the past. And this is the future. And so the future is kind of diffuse and very, very sort of a relaxed slope. The past, it's very clear what has just passed and what hasn't, right? So it's a sharp. Do you see that edge? Sharp edge? Okay. So we're used to thinking of the past and the future like this, where you can't see the future at all. There's no influence, right? And all I'm saying is that if you think about it like this, you're just traveling like this through time. Why shouldn't the nature of the future affect you? If there's a bump in the road coming down here that's important to you, why shouldn't that change the fabric? And in fact, so that's sort of my little metaphor or something. But in fact, there's in physics and in math, there's discussion of how we think of causality, you know, one thing causes another, as only moving in one direction in time. But it's two things. One, it's very difficult to prove causality. Like if I drop this book, boom, it falls down, right? But it's actually very difficult to prove that my dropping made it fall down. We just talk like that. And then the other thing is, just because the past can affect the present doesn't mean the future can't affect the present. We just don't experience it consciously, and yet it may be happening at the quantum level or even at the macro level here. And yet we don't experience it consciously. So these are the kind of things that give this loop idea. It's not even a loop so much as just the recognition that there could be two sources of effect on the present moment, the past and the future. Did that make sense?
Absolutely. And this is what I loved about your book, because you got into it and you had great examples to explain this. And then you take people on a way to start experiencing this themselves in their own life. So I think if you could speak to that a little bit more, like what are some of the techniques we can use, if you can share a few here, that would help us be able to initiate these type of experiences in our life where we have the ability to prophetically see the future, and to get through this whole idea that time is only from the past and we move forward, A plus B equals C, and into a more of a circular, I consider it more circular way of looking at life. So
I'll do from my perspective what
Please.
I would typically recommend, and then Julia will talk about what makes this book slightly different, and I hope me can stand out. For me, if I was doing a book about precognition just by myself, I would be doing, and what we do recommend in the book, look at your dreams, keep a dream journal, record that, listen to your feelings, what your hunches are, keep a record of that. Don't deny any feelings, explore them, because when you have what you feel is an irrational feeling, it's worth investigating. So that's what I would be doing, and observe yourself, especially your dreams. That's where I would be, what I would be talking about, and I would be looking at the difference between wishful thinking and intuition, and the difference between anxiety and precognition. You know, when we get this feeling of dread, is it really precognition, or is it just because we're feeling negative? Yeah. When we get this feeling of elation, is it precognition, or is it hope, wishful thinking? And there are certain ways that you can distinguish between the two, and that's what a book I would write would be about, which would be hopefully a brilliant read. But we're taking this now one step further to what Julia will be bringing in on top of that, which is a scientific experiment, a controlled precognition, which will be, I think, is what makes this book fascinating for people who believe or don't believe, because it's something that they can do and test. Actually, anyway, Julia, you need to take it from here.
Yeah. So people can check it out, right? You might as well just check it out. So first of all, everything Theresa said is extremely important. So I'm just going to reiterate, writing down your dreams, because for most people, the first precognitive experience that they're aware of is from a dream.
Yes.
So writing down your dreams so you know that you haven't fooled yourself with a memory. Being aware of your feelings, just becoming more and more aware of that, and trusting that inner voice that you might hear, writing down any sort of inner voice urges you have. And I would like to add to that, there's evidence that meditation can help people in precognition. So meditating, calming your mind so that you can hear the still small voice that comes from the future, or see the still small visions that come from the future. And yes, Theresa's right. We are creating what we think is the world's largest scientific experiment on precognition of its kind. It's a controlled precognition experiment that is done online. And controlled precognition is very similar to remote viewing. So in case you don't know what that is, I'll tell you. In fact, the book and the website will take you through the steps. The book explains each step in detail. The website will just remind you of the steps. There's 6 steps. And it's it's a process of getting in relationship between your conscious mind and your superconscious or your higher self. And then once you do that, intending to receive information about whatever the target is. Now, the target is on the website is a picture that you'll see in the future. It's one of 500 or more pictures that will be presented to you. You don't know which one, and even the website doesn't know which one. No one on the planet knows which one. It's created. Don't get me started on the cool random number generator. Anyway.
Okay.
No one knows which one, and no one can calculate which one.
I figured it was like based on a logarithmic math or something. Is that kind of part of it? Logarithms?
It's based on a quantum random number generator that's truly random, and then you can't predict which number will show up. So, I mean, you can, but I mean, you could only do it through precognition. You can't do it mathematically. So
I love it.
Yeah. So anyway, so your job is to sort of write down words and images that come to you in this process. It's a learn and discern process where you're relating between your higher self and your conscious mind, and you're sketching pictures and you're writing down words that come to you. And then at the end, the website will show you two graphs. Now, these graphs represent two randomly selected pictures, and you're to choose between the graphs which one represents the picture that you'll see next. And the graphs show 8 different areas, like animals and humans, liquids, sky, energy, hills and mountains, vegetation or food. So you might see a profile of, there's a lot of vegetation in this picture, but there's no humans. So that's one graph. And the other graph is, there's a lot of humans, but no vegetation. So there are two graphs that are different enough, and so that you can tell between them. Then you look at your pictures and figure out what you drew, match them to one of the graphs to which they're most similar. And then once you do that, the target picture comes up. Oh. Now, you'd think that that's a little complicated, and I know it sounds a little scientific, but the reason that we have those graphs, rather than just asking you to choose between the pictures, is that when you choose between two pictures, which one's going to be the target, both of those pictures are now in your future for the past that was trying to draw something, which means you can get confused between the pictures.
Wow.
And so we're trying to represent the pictures in this abstract way so you don't get confused and you only see one. It's a tricky problem to solve that a bunch of other scientists have been working on, but I discovered this way of solving it. We'll see if it works. I think it does. It does for me. I hope it does for other people. I think it will. And but the piece of this that I think is really important here to talk about is this higher self, conscious mind, sort of, I call it the handshake. The higher self handshake, to develop a relationship between our conscious daily waking lives and our superconscious, our higher self, which is the part of ourselves that can guide us into the future. So that's really important.
We talk a lot about the higher self on this channel. Will you define it for us a little bit more and talk a little bit more how this interplay happens between your personal self and the higher self?
Yeah, so what I'm calling the higher self is sort of New Age speak for a psychological term called superconscious.
Yes.
That's the one with the cape that flies around and guides you towards every good thing. But the superconscious is Robert Assagioli, this Italian psychologist, suggested that one of the things that we're not conscious of, besides our subconscious and our unconscious, is something he called the superconscious, which is like a really kind older brother or sister who helps guide you towards what's best for you, and actually can look ahead and say, ooh, this is going to be the right path. And to the extent you can listen to your superconscious and follow its advice, you will have a more satisfactory life. Superconscious sounded too technical, so we went with higher self.
Okay.
But it's the same kind of thing. And there's something about it too that I think is really helpful in precognition, that concept of the higher self handshake, this agreement to work, to let the conscious mind do what it's good at, which is keeping things on task and trying to be linear, and then to let the higher self do what it's good at, which is not try to be linear and try to get information and feed it to the conscious mind. So that's really important. That's the higher self handshake. But the other piece that I think is really important with this work is becoming friends with all of you as you are distributed through time. And by that I mean thinking of yourself as not just me in this moment, and then, oh, that was my past in the back, and that'll be my future. But instead thinking of yourself as what I think the Iroquois called the long body. So they had a long body through space. So wherever you were in space, that was part of you and part of your tribe. But this is more like the long body in time. So thinking of yourself as still existing back when you were 2 or 3 years old, and existing, I should go in the other direction. Yeah, okay. And existing in the future as well right now. And once you sort of get familiar with that long body and time, you recognize that your higher self might be something that has access to all of that. And that's why it's good with the advice, is because while you're here, it's able to look here and here and say, look, you're curving around in this direction, you know, towards music production or whatever it is you want to do. And that seems to be, this next step seems to fit in with that. So it has sort of the long view. And the more I notice that I'm kind or compassionate to my past and future selves and think positively about them, the kinder my life is. So it's a trick. And
that is so well said, Julia. I love this whole idea, the concept you brought up of the long body. That's beautiful, and I can see the imagery of that. I'm sure my audience can too. So this is great. This is great. So you're saying by being more compassionate to yourself at all stages, levels of your life, and you guys, we could throw even in previous lives, maybe, or future selves. I mean, we can get into hypnosis with this. And
that's another book.
So when you do that, as a therapist myself, you are healing these aspects of yourself that somehow you feel separate from or lost from. It's so beautifully said that I can see, just hearing it, the word gentle, like you said, it's a gentle way of viewing yourself so you can be more holistic in the present moment of now. That's wonderful. I mean, if there's any takeaway, you guys, hear this, because this is actually how you transcend time, by doing what she's saying right now. So how do you suggest being gentler with yourself? What do you do to evoke this even more?
Yeah, that's actually, I think that's a book I'm working on now, actually. But I'll tell you, a nice.
Oh, wow!
So, is that unfolding, Julia? Is that unfolding?
No, it's a book I'm calling Love Banking. So you put love in the bank when you have extra love, and you take love out of the bank when you need it, right? And so, but that love can be taken out and put in at any time along that axis. So this is what I do when I'm not feeling great. I'll lie down and I'll just sprawl on my bed and I'll say, okay, future me, send me love. Like I'm receiving it, right? And then when I'm feeling really good and I feel like I have love just dripping out over me and I just have endless energy, I'll take a moment and sprawl on my bed. I do lots of sprawling on my bed. Sprawl on my bed and put my hands on my heart and say, okay, and I'll imagine a past time that I had done this and that I needed love, and I will send love to that time. And it's just simple, and there's no constraints. It's not like, I'll love you if you change this, or I'll love you if you act this way. It's like, look, you're doing
all the people who've written to me about afterlife encounters and near-death experiences, that's what hits them immediately, that why we're here is to learn to do that self-love. I mean, I've spoken to many people who've had near-death experiences, and that's the message that comes, this circle of love that they're enfolding in, and it has to be love for the self. And that is the hardest thing in life, to find that love, because we're never told how to do it. We're always told you've got to love yourself, but there's nobody actually tells you, well, how?
Yeah, there's no directions.
There's no user's guide to how do you, because a lot of people struggle with that, and I think that's where all the problems start.
Yes.
And I think our journey on this planet and beyond, if you believe in it, is to try and actually return to love, to the self. And as I said, near-death experiences bear that out. That the people that I've spoken to, they say that is the message they get, why they're here, because they're suddenly hit on the other side when they cross over with this overwhelming feeling of love that's generated by them and is for them. And it's just interesting what you're saying, Julia, because it just ties in so much with near-death experiences, which I've written many books about.
Yeah.
and that's really what this is about as well, isn't it? It's a journey to love yourself.
Yeah, I mean that's the impact that sort of traveling in time gives you, right? Mm-hmm. The impact is to see yourself as this whole, rather than, there's something critical about seeing yourself as just at this moment. There's something I don't know, it's a duality, right? This is me and that isn't me and that isn't me, mm-hmm. To the right, to the past, to the future. Mm-hmm. And when you see yourself and you work with precognition every day in a controlled, sort of conscious way, you really get the connection. And that when your future self sees the feedback or sees the thing that you were trying to sketch before, you say, I see you were trying to pick up on, the leaf on the side of the picture, and instead you thought it was this flower, but it's really, the side of the picture where a person's standing, and you were concentrating on that. And I forgive you, because how could you know? And let's keep trying. And so there's this just building relationship that is really supportive of evolution and transformation.
And this relationship with your higher self, all parts of yourself, sounds like this is what builds, or it's the dirt that helps the seed grow into this precognitive abilities. I can see how this really goes hand in hand by trusting yourself to begin to work with these abilities within yourself, and then allowing that greater oversoul of yourself, the greater self, the greater mind, the super consciousness to experience these different points of reference, which is really you in a holistic way. I can see how this all goes so beautifully together. Gosh, I'm so glad you both wrote this book. I'm telling you guys, it's a great read.
Well, that's Julia's vision, you see. She's so visionary. It's taking it to the next level. She imagines a society when people have developed these abilities, the positive precog, where the economy is run by a map of the future. I mean, this is the scientist's vision you will see here. It's almost like we're walking into a sci-fi movie by the end of the book. It's amazing. It really is. It is, and I hope movie directors are looking at it, because she's looking at...
Oh, yeah.
It's a whole new world that she's dreaming up of people who have developed their precognitive powers to an ability where we can actually sense the future and use that information to create a better world. And that's just so beautiful. Because what's the point? I mean, what's the point of developing your precognitive abilities if you don't do something to make the world a better place? That's what I think anyway.
Thanks, Theresa. Yeah, I agree. It's really, it makes you feel better, and then you want to help the world, so...
Absolutely. I mean, this is what you term positive precog. This is what yes,
from
the
Minority
book.
Report. That's it's precogs in the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise. That's where the idea. But Julia didn't like that idea. She said because they're miserable. They're just stuck in a pool. They've got no relationships. They're unhappy. They die. Who wants to be that?
Right.
Yes. Made positive precogs who are actually working towards ethical principles.
Don't miss life, because they have a pretty bad life, the precogs in that movie.
Yeah.
So, although it's very exciting to think you have those abilities, not if it means you have to just lie in a pool all day.
Right. We don't wish that on anybody.
Well, you guys, we're at the point in the interview where I always ask my guests to share some words of wisdom or advice or suggestions in ways that they can simplify or make their life in, I guess, more streamlined. Just make their life a little more easier for them. And you go from any direction. I think you've shared a lot already about ways, but I'd like to hear you again, what you think are some of the most important, prudent things for the audience to hear as a good takeaway.
My takeaway, being a dream author, would be pay more attention to your dreams. They're things that we dismiss as unimportant, and don't give enough time. Just spend a few moments in the morning, and you think, well, I don't dream. Yes, you do. Just spend some time with those images, write them down. There's messages there from your higher self for you, and use those messages because to learn more about yourself. Because I find that when I pay attention to my dreams, I'm a much happier person. And if I'm too busy and too stressed and I'm not listening and I'm not remembering my dreams, I never feel as good. That for me, I'm much more productive when I'm actively dreaming, and even however random and insane the dream images are, there's
right.
something in there that is so fascinating, and I love that time when a day or so later you think, oh my God, I had that dream. And this is so relevant. The information I got there is so relevant to help me right now. Time and time again, it happens. Your dreams are fascinating. You are fascinating. And just start with your dreams. And it's a process of falling in love with yourself, because your dreams will tell you so much about yourself and other people in your life.
I so concur. I mean, everybody dreams at least 7 dreams a night. If you have 8 hours of sleep, 6 to 7 to 8, somewhere in that range. And when you start recording it, I love what you said, Teresa. You really get to know yourself. It does become a love relationship with yourself, because you're listening to yourself. You're hearing these inner ideas and inspirations and guidance, and maybe prophecy as well.
It's like an inner therapist for free.
Yes.
It's your own internal therapist. And there's this wonderful tribe, the Senoi tribe, I believe, who there's no mental illness or depression. And dream interpretation, from the age of 4, children are encouraged in the morning. The first thing they do is dream interpretation is everything, and they're taught to lucid dream. The Senoi tribe, Senoi, fascinating. And it's one of the happiest tribes on earth. Because dream interpretation is actually the most important thing. Their relationship with themselves in their dreams is considered to be so important. And I think we could all learn from that.
Absolutely. How about you, Julia?
Well, I second all that. I was raised in a family of two therapists as parents and 1 physicist. And so 3 parents, essentially. And the therapist would have us all sitting around the table talking about our dreams in the morning. And it was so useful. And now I do dream work for people. I dream for other people.
Yeah, this lady, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you. It's so fascinating. People will come to her with a problem, and then she will dream on it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I didn't believe there's this whole world of people who do this. And she is an oracle in ancient Greece.
Oh, that's
she would
amazing.
have been in a temple,
if I'm accurate,
it's unbelievable. She dreams for a living.
No.
She says, that's my dream night. I'm dreaming. Like, how many nights a week do you dream for people?
4 or 5 nights a week I dream for people. So I love dreaming for others, and I figure I'm asleep anyway, so I don't charge them so far. And sometimes they have remarkable insights based on my dreams, and sometimes they don't. But regardless, in any case, in every case, there's this connection that they can feel and I can feel, and it's very satisfying. It feels so. One of my suggestions would be, in addition to writing down your dreams, and in addition to connecting your higher self and your conscious mind in a conscious way, and in addition to looking at yourself across time and sending love and receiving love, is to do something that connects you mentally or creatively to other people. So, instead of it's really important to go see people face to face. And there's something about setting an intention to connect with someone on someone's superconscious, right? So to connect between the 2 superconsciouses. And that's what I think is going on when I'm dreaming for people. They write down their question on a piece of paper by their bed. I don't know what their question is, or not consciously anyway. And then I dream, and then often my dreams respond to their question. And
crazy.
Yeah, but maybe that's their interpretation, right? So maybe they just want it to respond, but it doesn't kind of matter, right? Because even if it's just their interpretation of what I'm saying, that's good, because that still gives them something to interpret, right? Mm-hmm. It's almost like tarot card reading, like even if it has, right? It's a Rorschach. Or I can never say that word. It's that kind of
Rorschach.
Thank you.
I've had this with Julia. When I first met her, it was really strange when she said I would ask her for an answer for something, and then I need to dream on it. And literally, she will go away. She'll have a dream, and then she'll tell you what the dream is and why she's come to the conclusion that she has the next day because of the images she saw in her dream.
That's fantastic. I mean, you guys out there, you can do the same. I mean, what do you think of having in your job description that you dream for others and maybe get paid for it? I mean, this is fascinating.
You would. I mean, she very generously, when we first did the book, offered to do that for people who pre-ordered the book. And now, I mean, I think she's crazily booked up for dreaming. But
true.
You've booked up. You've got to give all these dreams to people now.
Yeah, but it's delightful because I don't know who they are, and then by dreaming for them, I meet them. You know, they're just a name on a piece of paper I put on a Post-it note on my dream journal before I go to sleep, and I'm like, who's Sally field or whatever. And then I dream for them. And then in the morning, I feel like I have a much better idea of who they are. It's delightful.
Oh, that really is. It really is. Now, you guys, I just want to say thank you so much for coming
Thank
on
you.
this show and sharing your research, your study, and everything you've done around this topic of the precognition, premonitions, and becoming your own oracle. Where can people find you? You can give any of your websites out where you want people to contact you if they have further questions, and of course, to buy your book.
So thepremonitioncode.com is your website where you find both of us, and that has links to all of our links. So that's really the starting place, and I would prefer people go there.
Okay.
Because they'll also get exposure to the training set, the training experiments, videos. That site will be launched October 1st, if not before, but likely on October 1st. And they'll be able to participate in the experiment, learn about each of us, take some remote viewing / controlled precognition classes, all sorts of things.
It's all free as well, and it's on there. It's going to be a wonderful resource, and hopefully push things forward in the paranormal. That's what I'm hoping, that the website really takes things that one step further. And all those people say, where's the science? This is all anecdotal. There's an answer, well, the beginning of an answer.
That's right.
That's my hope, is my sincere hope for the book.
Well, thank you again, both of you, for being on the show, Theresa and Julia. I've really enjoyed my time with you, and I'm sure my audience has too. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Very welcome. So you guys, look, here's two women pushing the boundaries of consciousness, of awareness, of the higher self, of the time loop continuum. They're actually looking at ways to develop their own inherent abilities of precognition. Now, they both went about it from different directions, but it came together in a very beautiful marriage of the science and spirituality behind premonition and precognition. So get out there now and create powerful, impactful moments in your own life that helps you develop the relationship between you, your higher self, and your abilities of premonition. Until next time, this is Creative Visions TV. I'm Karen Dahlman, and I'll see you again real soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.